Hey, it's Melvin, one of your friendly neighborhood podcast hosts. Whether it's your first time tuning in or you're a longtime listener, consider leaving a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever. Reviews are the lifeblood of the podcast world, so if you want to help us out, it'll take only a moment of your time. Otherwise, we hope you enjoy the show. You're listening to Cinematic Doctrine. So hey, if you just press play, you're missing out on a whopping hour of talking about the MCU. Number one, because my time management continues to seem to get worse and worse with every recording. But mostly just because we have a good time going through 34 Marvel movies. We went up and opened the Rotten Tomato Meter ranked least to greatest listing for the MCU. We start at the least, we go up to the greatest. And we spend like about 1 to 2 minutes talking about each film. And you get access to this discussion by going to patreon.com/cinematic doctrine, supporting for $3 a month at minimum, which will get access to everything. And then you get to have this episode start with that discussion. Every episode that's posted usually has a Patreon discussion that strives for 20 to 30 minutes. And then sometimes we fail aggressively. But I guess suppose at the end of the day, my failure is your success, listener, because now you get more stuff for cheap. There's other benefits to supporting on Patreon, so check out the Patreon and hear about those, as well as listening to this episode, because you'll hear about it cut in and out through editing. We're going to be doing a movie discussion on Ready Player One. Movie discussions are super, super simple. They are basically just like 5 general discussion topical questions for us to just explore the film. What do we think of the movie? What did it draw out in us? What are some themes or ideas? Stuff like that. The first half is roughly no spoilers. The no spoilers section will just be how do we feel about it? What do we think? All that jazz. All the good stuff. And then about halfway into the episode, we'll transition into spoilers. There's no specific time. I'll just introduce it when we do that. So you'll be able to get some vibes on this film. Of course, it was hugely popular in 2018, so you probably have already seen it. And then, we'll be exploring all that. I have a guest today. I've been saying we, and now I'll explain who that we is. I have Frank from Geek Freaks, a very long-running, multifaceted program that he has, which has just been so exciting to explore and get to know. And I'm just excited to have a chat about what he does, where it comes from, all that jazz. What is going on, Frank?
Hey, everybody. Yeah, I'm Frank from Geek Freaks, and I'm addicted to podcasting, so I've got a real problem. That's the point of it, really.
Yeah, I can see the patches on his arm. They said they spell out the words podcasting freak. It's crazy. I thought it was supposed to be Geek Freak. Oh, man. So 6 years ago, you said you started this. What kicked that off? What got you interested in doing podcasting?
Well, I was a podcast fan, really, and there's also this thing where, once you get to a certain age, guys in your 30s and all your friends start getting families, you're like, man, we don't talk as much as we used to. So I thought, let me find a way to make sure we talk at least once a week. And the podcast was born.
Oh.
The scheduling is definitely the biggest boss. It's the final boss of podcasting. So
yes,
not everybody's on every time, but it's at least a home. They're all welcome to chat on a Saturday night about their favorite Marvel things or whatever, So
the idea was initially, in some ways, let's make a way to make sure we still get together. And if we make it a podcast, we can call it some sort of hobby or work, so everyone accepts what we do and it makes time. But also, like, you then decided to talk about like geek stuff and all that jazz. Like, why all that jazz seems to be my phrase today. Where did you get that idea to specifically do geek stuff? And did you shop around some other ideas?
Well, the original Geek Freaks is actually called Top 5 Podcast. And it was just, hey, let's just do our top 5 of any type of topic. Hey, comics, movies, whatever. But then we would record that and then sit around the table and talk for another 2 hours about the latest thing from whatever, the geekdom. And so eventually we're like, why are we not just recording this part? This is the part that we actually are super excited to talk about. Let's just record this part. Yeah. And boom, it's Geek Freaks. Yeah.
Yeah, I was seeing your catalog, and it was just amazing to me as I kept scrolling and seeing there's more. So there's 4 shows that I saw that you're a part of. You have Geek Freaks Podcast, which is like the main general all-purpose geek news stuff. Geek Freaks Headlines, which is just so smart. Like just going to like your YouTube and seeing your shorts have like so many views. I'm like, man, he knows what he's doing. And then so you got bite-sized quickies on geek news, stuff like that. Geek Freaks interviews, which is just such a good cavalcade of guests of all kinds. I saw AJ Locascio, who's the VA for
He's amazing.
X-Men 97's Gambit, which is just so cool. Kevin Mellon who co-directed Hit Monkey, a couple episodes of that, which is just like, man, you're just getting some good guests here, storyboarding as well. And then I popped for a Daniel Basutti because I like Insidious a lot, so which was really cool. And then I'm sure God of War fans are extremely interested in that. And then you also had Challenge Accepted, which is more of a general all-purpose anything kind of topical discussion. So you started Geek Freaks 6 years ago, and I haven't even listed all the other podcasts that are a part of Geek Freaks, but you're doing like at least 4 right now. Where does that excitement and interest and compulsion come from?
Well, when we started Geek Freaks, it was just basically me and the friends. And then Outlast Podcast is like the first spinoff, and that was one where it was like, hey, I really like Survivor, and let's talk about Survivor. My mom likes Survivor. So it's a podcast with me and my mom. It's really chill. But then a podcast that started about the same time as Geek Freaks is called Pushing Buttons, and it was 3 guys that worked together and would talk about video game topics. We became fast friends over social media, as many of us do. And eventually they were like, hey, we have to cancel the show, guys. We're done. And then we became friends over Discord as well. And I was like, why don't you guys bring back Pushing Buttons? It's a fantastic podcast. Like, schedule doesn't work for it, and we don't have time to edit it. I'm like, here's the deal. I'll make a network, throw my logo in the corner of your guys' little album art there, whatever, and I'll just edit your shows for you. So all you have to do is record. And it gave them the ability to return and hang out as friends. And I was like, let's do that again. And so we have 12 shows, I think, in the library of the archive. And it's basically like, hey, I just want to talk about Star Trek. And like, yeah, find a host. Let's do it. I'll help you set it up. I'll show you how to do it all. I'll edit it for you. And boom, Trek Freaks or Disney Mom's Gone Wrong. Or we have a bunch of shows that are all the idea of like, hey, I want to do a podcast. I don't know what to do. Can you help me, Frank? Yes, I can. Just put the Geek Freaks in the corner. We'll help you out.
So you had mentioned how scheduling is like the bane of the current process, which I agree. That has been like, whenever I've had a consistent co-host, we'll have set up like, all right, we're going to record Monday mornings. So block out Monday mornings, and then give or take 3 or 4 weeks, and they'll go, I'm busy every Monday morning. And I'm like, what do you mean you're busy every Monday morning? We specifically agreed. But editing has also like number 2 on most people's like list of frustrations. And you're just out here saying, I'll edit your show. Do you particularly enjoy audio editing out of the process?
I actually do. I went back to school for it and became a fast fiend for it. And I'm a big World of Warcraft player. And in doing so, I have a 12-button mouse for World of Warcraft. And I have macroed that thing for editing now too. So it's like boom, 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 boom. I'm pretty quick with it. Yeah. And that helps a lot. But also, people are always like, oh, Frank, are you listening to this podcast? Are you listening to that podcast? No, I'm listening to my podcast all the time because who's got time for podcasting after that? Yeah. And so I hear the latest on gaming because I'm editing 2 different gaming podcasts and stuff like that. So it is something I enjoy doing. And it's hard because, especially with my own voice, I change different settings and stuff all the time just to try to maximize how it sounds good. And it's frustrating when you hear like these podcasts that get $30 million a year and you're like, you couldn't edit out the breaths. There is a little bit of that going on too, where I'm like, why didn't you guys do this? And I have learned time and time again that the listeners just want a conversation. They don't necessarily need to sound as good as possible, but also I want to make sure that you're comfortable listening to us. So it's guys, it's been 6 years. I have learned lessons over and over again, the same lessons oftentimes. I love podcasting so much. I get hooked.
So tons of shows, big fan of podcasting. It really made me curious. Like I was like, does he have like a bucket list show? Because I know I do. Like a show that if someone paid me, I would be like, this is what I want to do. Do you have one where like this is the fantasy scenario? Hey, Frank, we like your show. We like what you do. Here's $5,000. Make that show you want to make. What is it? What's the show?
Well, first off, if you're like me, like you, Melvin, you probably have a list in your phone of like, okay, if I had more time, these are the shows I do.
Yes.
The one that's been living rent-free in my brain right now is, again, I'm a World of Warcraft player. I've been for the last 20 years. And it's got probably 3,000 characters in that game. And so many of them are forgotten. So I've been really thinking about, actually by the time this comes out, who knows, I probably already started it, a podcast called The Forgotten Heroes of Azeroth, where I do like a deep dive into the lore of a real random character that people just walk by every day. And kind of build out this
Cool.
like fantasy story. And I specifically want to do that podcast in character of somebody who lives in the world, like Lore Walker Taff, which is my character's name, and like chronicling the stories of the Forgotten Heroes of Azeroth. And that would have a musical scape to it. I've done a few episodes in the past where we've done like scary stories where we add like elements of music and, creaking stairs. I would want to add that to this, One of the other ones on the list is icons. And what I would like to do is there's so many very, very important people to the geekdom that are oftentimes unsung heroes. Again, there's another unsung hero one I'm realizing now. But like one of my favorite stories is the whole like Lucille Ball basically saving Star Trek because she believed in it and stuff. So I would love to dig into how these people changed the industry that they were a part of and kind of just really dig deep into like who's the one that invented the clappers for movies or something like that, and just really getting into that too. It would be a total essay project. It would be a lot of time, a lot of effort. Yeah, I would need some money for that one. Whoever wants to start that podcast, I need a paycheck. That's going to take some time.
So for anyone listening who can afford to do so and might be able to reach out with a $5,000 check, where can people get connected with you?
Honestly, just Google Geek Freaks. You'll find the website, everything, all the things, and you'll find a lot of links to just email me. I get emails all the time from people, so I know that's out there.
Yeah, and people can check the show notes too. For this episode, they'll see it at the very top with links to social stuff, the website, all that jazz. But I think it's about time to start getting into Ready Player One. I think it's time. Hey, don't forget, there's a lot of fun content missing from this episode because you're not listening on Patreon. Head over to patreon.com/cinematic doctrine and support for $3 a month to gain access to uncut episodes with upwards of 40 minutes of bonus content each. You'll thank me later. So just in brief for Ready Player One, to give some background, Ready Player One is a Steven Spielberg film from 2018, PG-13, 2 hours, 20 minutes. Yes, I'm reading the top of IMDb. This film is based on a book written by Ernest Cline. The book is actually fairly recent, like within like the last 15 years. And it was a pretty dang popular book. I remember hearing about it before the film came out and seeing people reading it at the time. The premise of the book was this kid basically is inside a video game world that is stupendously popular across the world. This of what would now colloquially be called a metaverse, although I guess that would date the podcast to 2021 because now that no one uses that phrase anymore. Inside this metaverse, we have our character Wade, who is trying to beat an Easter egg that the creator of the game has put in after his death, or at the very least was revealed after his death. And the Easter egg, if someone can complete it, it's a series of 3 quests, will earn the right to own the game and also have like shares in stock, stuff like that. Basically become rich and run the game. And this game is a big deal because so many people play it that there are companies that will farm out materials into the game and trade it to people, and that's for real world money. In the book, people go to school in the game and stuff like that. In the movie, they just mostly stick to the game world stuff. And the movie, they also very much assert that the game world can be anything, you can do anything, be anyone, and in the real world, you're stuck being you. And in this case, Wade lives on what is called the stacks, which is trailer upon trailer upon trailer stacked up into the sky. And yeah, the movie explores how he goes and beats this Easter egg against a company that is trying to also beat the Easter egg. Before we get into the film, let's talk the book very briefly. Ready Player One. Frank, did you read Ready Player One?
I have started it twice, and I'm about the same spot where I stopped last time, which is after he does the very long explainer world building aspect of the book, and we're not actually into Ready Player One yet. So I have tried twice, and I'm dedicated to get through it this time because I'll hear my brother finished the number 2 and says the sequel is very good as well. So I'm like, okay, I'll get through it. I'll try again. What about you?
I'm curious if you and I stopped at the same page because I tried reading this. I personally found Wade very unpleasant and annoying. There's like a part, so he's like going to school and somebody's trying to bully him. And he is like, so I held my head up high and I pressed the mute button and I couldn't hear him anymore. And I was like, that's not cool. Like, I just found that really annoying. And then like, he also has these other like, just series of like he's so different from the movie, at least from the parts of the book I read. I read about 60 pages, 70 pages.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, I couldn't get into it. I didn't find the referential stuff very interesting. That's another thing I forgot to mention. Ready Player One is the maker of the game loves the 80s and the 90s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. So the game is littered with stuff that is constant reference of it. And so this Easter egg, because it's built around his knowledge, the whole book is littered with that stuff. So is the movie, with a much more bent on the 80s and 90s stuff, because, that's the generation that would be going to see the movie. And, but yeah, the book, I just couldn't get into it. And I know a lot of people love it. But I just, I couldn't endure it, is really what it came down to. But as for the movie, what did you think of the movie?
The movie is very, very fun to watch. In a lot of ways, you watch it just for the oh, hey, there's Iron Man, or the Iron Giant. There's the DeLorean. That's the reason you watch this movie. I feel like it's basically just a vehicle for that, honestly. Did I have fun watching this? Absolutely. I did back then. I did, when I watched it this week as well. But this time watching it, I was like, boy, there's a lot of CGI in this thing. Obviously, it's in a computer game, but also kind of now it feels cheaper because of it for some reason. And at the time, I don't remember it feeling that way.
Fascinating.
Yeah, it's a solid movie. It's definitely not one that I'm super excited for the sequel.
Yeah, I tried looking up to see where's the sequel, and it doesn't seem like there's much progress. I wonder if COVID really affected that, because I know COVID put so many projects just at the guillotine. That just ended so much. Most of my knowledge of Ready Player One has been not wanting to finish the book, but wanting to see the movie, kind of being fascinated that Spielberg directed it, although it kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
And the opening of this film is just a lot. I actually found it really difficult to watch because of that at the start, although I will say any of my negative notes I made kind of faded as the film calmed down. I would say about 20 minutes in is when the film levels out, which I just was so thankful for, because it is a smorgasbord of it's like when you play a video game and there's so many particle effects and you can't see anything because also the heads-up display is in the way. And that was just really, really upsetting to me in terms of I'm trying to relax, but I can't focus. I don't know if you had that experience. And I know that's such a very odd movie watching criticism to have, but I was just shocked that the start of this movie, I was like, oh my gosh, this is too much for me. But what did you think?
Very well said. And it's funny because later on, about halfway through the movie, we learned that Sorrento is pitching this idea of having ads in there as well. And at that point, you're already I'm exhausted already. Don't add ads, please. And it reminds me so much of the freemium games you get on your phone, where we're at the point now where can I just pay for this game, please? Can I give you $5 just to play this crappy game and not have to deal with the ads? And that's what this movie feels like. It feels like those mobile games that is not good, but it's just shutting my brain off for a second. Please don't add ads to it. And that's what this movie gives you. And
every now and then the film tosses in very pointed, borderline RoboCop-like humor. One of the scenes transitions and it's a commercial out of RoboCop, although it doesn't commit entirely, but it is a good setup for some stuff that'll come in later. I think the movie's interesting. That's kind of how I stepped away with it in terms of what do I think. And I think the movie has a lot to talk about in terms of nostalgia, iconography, sometimes technology. I guess not sometimes. The whole thing is about technology. And then also the real world too, although I'll definitely expand on what I think about that a little later. But yeah, it was interesting. This was my first time watching it. I didn't see it in theaters a couple years ago. So it was definitely interesting to be late to the party and see what it looked like. But what did the movie, before we get into spoilers, what did the movie evoke in you? What did it draw out while you were watching it?
There was plenty of just enjoying the visuals of oh, hey, there's 4 Master Chiefs. But it also kind of got to this point, and the book is actually worse on this case, that Wade is so angsty to the degree that I'm just dude, life is so much harder than you're making. You are
Yeah.
He's frustrating and angsty. Like, he definitely works at Hot Topic kind of thing. And it's like, I just want to buy a shirt with Rick and Morty on there, dude. I don't need to hear about this. So I get the vibe. The whole movie's that, right? And like this whole like love relationship, like, you won't like me the way I look. And I'm just like, God, guys, nobody's paying bills here. I can feel it. And so there's a lot of that going on, which is definitely like, I'm a curmudgeon 30-year-old type of thing going on. But yeah, it's still fun to watch because, again, this was a whole lot of DeLoreans and stuff like that in the background, and Tracer from Overwatch, and it's like, oh, that's cool. Yeah, that kind of thing, Yeah.
Yeah, I remember reading that, like, I remember the description of Wade in the book was that he was like a less, let's call it, because this is entirely talking about someone's physical form. So I don't like doing that. But he was described in the book as being a less visually pleasing person to look at. And then you cast Ty Sheridan, who still has like, a scrungled face, but he's a good looking guy. And so like, it's a very different type of person. And in the book, there's a point to that because his avatar in the game is like a good looking like guy, like a Hot Topic employee. Yeah, that works. And then like conversely, Olivia Cook's character, Artemis, whose main name I don't remember, as supposed to be like have a birthmark that's supposed to be visually like unpleasing, and she's very nervous about it. And I think in the book is described as less visually pleasing. And then it's like you cast Olivia Cook though, like she's a good looking woman. So it's like I get that like people can be shy and nervous about their looks, but let's try a little harder with our casting here, guys. Come on. That was an interesting decision to make. But yeah, anything else drawn out while you were watching it?
The commentary, I think, was, I mean, I understand it, but it's heavy-handed. It's like if Michael Bay were to make a Black Mirror. It's, I get it, guys. You don't have to be like, the stacks are this bad, let's talk about it for another 10 minutes. Like, no, I know it's terrible. So yeah, it's definitely not going for subtle at any point in this movie.
You may not know this, but the easiest way you can show your support for Cinematic Doctrine is to rate and review the podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen. So press pause and share your thoughts. We'd love to hear what you have to say. And then press play again so you can hear the rest of the show.
For me, I've one of my first thoughts was, and this is just me having like a marketing brain, but I thought like, how does a movie that is full of, so this movie was like really marketed as a big blockbuster, and it did make a lot of money. It was treated like one. It was and it was a new thing. But it's a new thing that's so predicated on old things and so interlaced with old stuff. Like references, you mentioned Master Chief, and like that's like maybe like 0.1% of the mentions in this movie. There are things on every screen, everywhere. It's all over the place. And I just kept thinking like, okay, Ready Player One, the movie comes out, and you can buy the movie ticket, that's some profit. You can buy the movie, like to own it, that's some profit. But like, what is the rest of the money you would make from this property? Like, are people buying Parzival shirts? Or when I watch the movie, do I go, oh, like, actually, I just want to get a Gundam shirt or something? Or like, is anybody buying like, I guess I've seen cosplayers for some of these characters, but that's a different type of work. But yeah, I just kept thinking like, if you had toys that were based on these characters, would I get one based on H, or do I want that Mecha Godzilla at the end? And I was thinking like, it feels like, this is a weird comparison, but Netflix became very popular because a lot of movie companies and studios put their movies on Netflix before Netflix had content at all. So Netflix is basically making money off of the backs of other people. And then years later, everyone realized that was a bad business move and pulled their content, started making their own stuff. And I was like, Ready Player One feels like a movie that like is making some of its profit off of the backs of other people, but unlike the Netflix model, can't really keep funneling that money, and now has just benefited like Gundam, has benefited Halo, has benefited Overwatch, so on and so forth. Perhaps, I don't know, but it just felt that way. We're like, like I don't see Ready Player One merch anywhere, but I see Gundam stuff when I go to Barnes and Noble. Like that's right. So just found that really interesting. I don't know if you had any thoughts on that, but to me, like I could not stop thinking about that.
Well, I recently interviewed entertainment lawyer Josh Listine, and his whole thing is like negotiating when you have somebody showing up in a movie and stuff like that. And I just thought, while I'm watching this time, I'm like, holy cow, the lawyers that had to put this thing together were intense.
Yes.
And you could feel the licensing. Now that I'm watching it this time, I'm like, okay, they had a license with Blizzard because we have Tracer, we have the guy from
Jim Raynor. Jim Raynor, StarCraft.
Yeah. So it's like, okay, so that's a Blizzard license. And then it's like, well, obviously they got Steven Spielberg, so they got the Amblin license. So you have everything Amblin, including he has the license for Master Chief. So there's that one. And so it's like, you could feel that they must have gotten some sort of John Hughes license out there somewhere. Like they had certain licenses that was enough of an umbrella to cover a lot of these characters to get it. And yeah, if I'm going to buy merch for this, I'm not going out to get a Percival thing. I'm going to go get the Iron Giant on a shirt. It's not that. So very odd marketing sense.
The other thing I had was just that as a Spielberg movie, I was like, why does this feel like a Spielberg movie, but not have like the excitement that I've come to know from him? And I say that specifically because it feels like this movie's evoking his early, more, I would say, like awe-stricken films. So like Jaws, Jurassic Park, E.T., Saving Private Ryan, even though Saving Private Ryan transitions more into his like, I want to make stuff based on the real world, and especially World War II, of which he just kept doing. But I was like, what's the difference here? And I wondered if it was because like the whole film is so digital. You started mentioning the digital stuff, but there's not a lot of realism. Whereas like, okay, Jaws, Jurassic Park, E.T., they're not real movies, but like they're grounded real settings with like one extravagant thing. So Jaws, you have this giant killer shark. And then you see how that affects the real world and these really strong characters. Jurassic Park, kind of the same thing, where like you have this extravagant Jurassic Park that does not exist, but like, let's see what it does. Like if someone were to do that, well, now that's based on a book, but it's then translated to the screen. And it's like, what are we going to do with that? Well, we're going to have like, what's the philosophy of opening a Jurassic Park? What would happen if like the dinosaurs got loose? So on. And what would happen if a competitor sabotages this? What happens? And it's like, oh, dinosaurs roam the earth, I guess. And so like that in itself, like is a grounded movie with this extravagant thing. And then E.T. is like, what if we had our friends, what if we had this one person make a bizarre new friend, and they're very weird, but they're a lot of fun, and it teaches them about like what it's like to grow up, to suffer well, to love, and then it's all in the span of 2 hours and it changes everybody's life. I just had difficulty wondering what was the grounded part of Ready Player One, because this movie feels so kids on bikesy. It feels a lot like E.T. honestly sometimes. And Jurassic Park. But then I was trying to figure out like, what's the grounded thing? And then what is it that's like the like, I don't know, what is the movie trying to tell me? I don't know if you thought of any of this, or if you're tracking with me, but I'm curious what you think about this, because I could have seen if Ready Player One was any other director, but it's Spielberg, which is very interesting to me. So what do you think?
Spielberg's movies have this really beautiful thing where the first time you watch it, you walk away. I'll use Jaws. First time you watch it, you're like, man, that part where the shark jumps on the boat, amazing. And that's the part you're thinking of. The second time you watch it, and you do watch it again because it's a Spielberg movie and they're that good, then you're like, my favorite part is when they're getting drunk and talking about stories. And then why did Brody lift his shirt and then put it back down? You start questioning, like you see this movie when you watch the first time, you're like, that was, my brain hurts. Hey, that was cool to see whatever this character. And then the second time you're watching, like, oh, I saw more of those characters. I don't have a grounded moment where I'm looking back at it like, oh, the way they connected here was really neat. The parts that were supposed to be grounding, like meeting, hearing that, or learning that H is a woman, like he kind of hinted, or she hinted to beforehand, or learning that Artemis has the birthmark. Those weren't grounding. I mean, that's just like, okay, you guys didn't develop enough of the trying to be someone else for a certain reason. It was more just a cool world. That's something that the book harps on too much, is the idea that like this is escapism from a terrible place. And in the movie, it's almost like they don't give that enough weight, but it is very important if you want those moments to be impactful to us. And they just they're forgettable, really.
And I feel like you see attempts at this. I saw someone else's read that was something like the film is sort of this, it starts with the excitement and fun of an otherworldly place where you can get into a car accident and in real world you don't die, that kind of thing.
Right.
But then the film, as it continues, starts to show how the digital world, because of its prominence, is affecting the real world. And so, like, going into the movie, I was like, okay, that'll be interesting to see if, like, that's done. And, you know, Spielberg is a master. I'm sure he can do it. And then, like, as the movie was continuing, I saw parts of that. But then I was like not getting it entirely. I felt like some parts of the movie did it. So number one would be like, there's a later scene where they're in the real world and they're interrogating someone. The good guys are. But then you later learn like, oh, it was in the digital world. They just completely recreated it to look like the real world. And I was like, that's a really interesting idea to do with sci-fi, where like you're now, because this person has a visor on and is fully incensed into this world, you can do a lot of, frankly, powerful things with that in mind. And they don't explore it much further because it's more just a thing to happen for the plot to continue. But it has like stuff like that is very interesting to me. And then the line in the beginning where it's like you could be anybody you want, and he describes like you could be any height, sex, any gender, anything. And like that is really interesting. And they kind of play into it, like you said, with H, but not that much, which is, I don't know. I kind of wish, like, I think if the movie slowed down a little more, or perhaps didn't do so many extravagant set pieces, because there's actually a lot in the movie. There's a lot, yeah. I feel like there could have been space for that. And then before we go into spoilers, of the 3 Easter egg challenges, which one's your favorite?
I think the first one, the car, I think is simple enough, fun enough. I think it kind of sets up this idea that, oh, you just have to think a little bit differently. And it's so simple that you're like, no, duh, but also so simple that nobody would have done it. Like drive backwards into the wall, like doesn't make any sense. So I thought like, that's classic. That's good. The second one, let's see, what was that? The dancing one? I can't even fully remember. Wow, I just watched it. That's the problem, right?
Is the second one Shining? I think so.
Yeah, it was okay. The third one I thought was nice. If you had read any of the book, the beginning of the book, really, then you were like, oh, I remember him mentioning that whole thing about the guy putting the Easter egg in the, so that was kind of cool. But yeah, I think the first one's just, it's simple, it's easy, it's fun. Yeah, that's my favorite one. What about you?
I think I liked the Shining one because I felt like it was that was another actually showcase of a combination of technology and the digital and real, which I thought was neat. And I liked I thought it was inspired to then not just do like, oh, his favorite movie his movie he took this date on was The Shining, so we're going to go into the movie The Shining. But that there are these digital copies of themselves, their avatars, and then they do the overlay to make it look like they're like it's a film reel, 35 or 70, I don't know. And like point. I thought that like visually was pleasing. I liked the willingness to do like I just like that Spielberg trusts that like kids and teens can keep up with him, so he doesn't mind putting in scary stuff into his movies that are ostensibly for families. But I thought that one was a ton of fun. It looked great, and then I also I kind of liked that. Honestly, the Halliday stuff I thought was great, and this was like one of the biggest sellers for me. That I really liked the lore stuff that we got with Halliday. But honestly, with that in mind, I guess we can officially go into spoilers, so we can talk more about Halliday, talk more about the ending, talk more about this and that, whatever. So if you haven't seen the movie and any of the stuff we've discussed interests you, you can totally check it out. You just go on Just Watch, really, and just check out Ready Player One. It's probably available on everything at this point. And if you haven't seen the movie and you don't really care and you just want to hear our lovely voices as we talk about stuff and things, then keep listening. Hey, listener, we've got a mailbag now. Open those show notes, scroll down a little, and you'll see a mailbag link. Press it and send us a text with a question and your first name, and we'll answer it in a future episode. So if any questions pop up while you're listening to the rest of this episode, you know what to do. We'd love to hear from you. So we're going to go into spoilers. Recurring symbols, iconography, motifs, instrumentation, or catchphrases. Was there any recurring stuff, themes, or whatever that you caught?
Just the mirror to society, and seeing this kind of repetitiveness that we've seen within ourselves throughout the entire movie. And we actually hinted to it at the last part, and I wanted to bring it up again here. I think, I think one of the strongest things is the fact that he keeps going to the archives and watching this man's life and how he didn't take his chances, and then we're seeing that, echoed onto Wade. Will he take his chances? And I did like that he kind of learned from Halliday, and that was what Halliday really wanted to do in the end, in a way. So just kind of the mirror on its own society, I think, was the repetitiveness that was being shown. It's a little tough to really nail down what it was. What did you find anything particular?
So yeah, I mentioned the Halliday stuff being a favorite of mine, and like one of the first times is we kind of see more of that as the archive. Parzival goes to the archive, and it's common that people, when the Easter egg was first announced, would go to this archive because it first appeared. And the archive was basically everything that Halliday recorded about himself, and it was basically everything in his entire life. He had a record of, or a diary, or recording. And so you could just go through this archive to study it and maybe find something that would teach you about the Easter egg. Halliday is talking with his co-creator, Ogden Morrow. Morrow is talking about like how they have to do a particular thing to change the game, and there's investors expecting a particular thing. And Halliday is waxing poetic about how he wishes like if they could just go back to doing what the fun stuff they used to do when they did early game development. He says, why can't we go backwards? And this, of course, is when Parzival gets the idea to drive backwards in the first Easter egg, and that's how you get past the giant, get past King Kong and get to the key. But this would kind of continue and very much signal to the audience that the film, which very clearly, but now is audibly telling you, is about kind of like nostalgia, looking to the past. And then as Halliday's story continues, is very much about like regrets and like wishing you could make changes. And I do like some of this stuff here, that like the movie has this through line of regret, because like, if you're fascinated by the past and you're nostalgic for the past, it's usually not just, oh, I like this thing in the past that I can enjoy now. It's kind of what, I mean, listeners of the show have been hearing me talk about this all year, where like, I'm starting to have these observations that I have a history that I yearn for, that isn't my recent past anymore. It is distant past and totally gone. The elementary school I went to doesn't exist anymore. So like, Same. It's just, there's things I can't go back to. And that's weird. And the Halliday plotline is that. And I don't know. I just thought it was amazing. I liked all that stuff. I wish it was more. I wish the movie was about it. I wish the whole movie was about Halliday and making this game. But yeah. And it sounds like you liked it a lot too, the Halliday stuff.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that I'm often doing nowadays is thinking, because this is how TV has become, this would have been better as a series. And I thought that about this one as well, because then it was like, then we could we could fully let Halliday breathe in his own segments, not just through the archives, but we could see those like flashbacks and then watch the references come through. And I thought this thing would have been able to been paced better and breathe more through a series. There is a thing where like, I think it's kind of this generation, my generation, the millennials and stuff like that, that we are so nostalgic, and it's because we've been hammered since, frankly, 2001, really, with just dire event after dire event. And we're like, man, I sure wish it was still the Gummy Bears and DuckTales. And we long for that. We long for the carefree times of the 90s when you watch The Matrix, they literally say like, oh, we picked 1999 because it was the peak of humanity. And here in 2023, you're like, yeah, I get that. I can see what you're saying. Friends was on. Okay. And so there's a lot of that in this movie where I think as an adult watching it, you could see what Halliday was trying to do, where he was trying to say like, there was a time when we were carefree and had a lot of fun. There's a time I wish I can go back and change things and make those moves that would have been better. And then there's a reference to, the entire time it's all about, oh, I didn't want to make things awkward with my friend. But then it's also like, well, I love him so much that I don't want to stop him from his pursuits and his love. I do like all that. There is also a side to this one I'm watching where I'm like, is there any ego involved in this? That all the clues for your fortune is that people have to like really fall in love with you as a person and learn everything about you. Would I do that myself? No, I don't think I would. I don't think like I want you guys to learn everything about my likes. I think I would make it to be like, hey, this is, if I were to put any sort of puzzle, like this is the puzzle to what I think the betterment of humanity is. And I'm not saying that I'm the betterment of humanity, but it kind of feels like that's what Halliday's saying here. That's the cynical side of me watching this, of course. So who knows?
But I think you're right. You're reminding me of this was getting reshared again for a bit. I'm gonna open it up. Where's my screenshots? So Roger Ebert has this thing. It's his stuff on fans. I'll read it really quickly. It's just 2 paragraphs. He goes, a lot of fans are basically fans of fandom itself. It's all about them. They have mastered the Star Wars or Star Trek universes or whatever, but their objects of veneration are useful mainly as a backdrop to their own devotion. Anyone who would camp out in a tent on the sidewalk for weeks in order to be first in the line for a movie is more into camping on the sidewalk than movies. Extreme fandom may serve as a security blanket for the socially inept who use, and he's, I'm not saying these things Roger Ebert is, we're just going to talk about what he's saying, I guess. But extreme fandom may serve as a security blanket for socially inept who use its extreme structure as a substitute for social skills. If you are a Luke Skywalker and she is a Princess Leia, you already know what to say to each other, which is so much safer than having to ad-lib it. Your fanish obsession is your beard. If you know absolutely all the trivia about your cubbyhole of pop culture, it saves you from having to know anything about anything else. That's why it's I do find this funny, though. That's why it's excruciatingly boring to talk to such people. They're always asking you questions they know the answer to. Obviously, he's being biting in his observation. And as podcasters, it's fair to say that we, and Roger Ebert as a fan of movies, frankly, that we are definitely of the ilk that has definitely fans or fans of fandom of some kind. But I do think what you're saying and talking about this guy who kind of has what was a bit described here. He's afraid of the ad-libbing. He doesn't want to make things awkward, but it's but sometimes to have a relationship, to be with people, to exist at all is to brush up against other people in ways that may be momentarily uncomfortable, but ultimately beneficial. And in that way, it is weird that the film has this combined sense where Halliday is the one teaching the lesson, but is also the guy saying, read my anthology, read my biography.
And the great lesson is that Percival runs away with is I won't be like Holiday. I'll take my chance with a girl. And it's you are following this man a lot to be your thing to take away is to not do what he did. It's very odd in that way, right? And the best part about fandoms, Ebert, good or bad, the best thing about fandoms is the community. It's a shared language that we all speak that we use to create communities. And that's what us podcasters thrive in, is the fact that, hey, we all speak the same language of Klingon or Dothraki, but we do. And in doing that is a way to then explore, what sci-fi is for. That's what this movie's for. Yeah. We use these lenses to look at modern society and translate that into our language, and then can take action to better it in a different way. Holiday is trying to do that with hey, those Hughes movies were great, right? Don't you want to return to when it was just about this or that? And I think if the movie did a better job of kind of explaining that part of it, hey, I'm using my fandoms to explain what I think would be an ideal world, that would be nice. But instead, I think it comes off as, and maybe the book does a better job than the movie, but it comes off as just being watch my thing a lot, me chatting with my friends about a date I was on, and try to take away a nugget of information I said, and then just drive backwards. I just think the movie didn't have enough time to breathe to tell the themes that it wanted to.
Enjoying this episode? Grab that share link and tell your friends. Word of mouth is the most effective way for a podcast to reach new listeners, so don't be shy. Share the episode wherever you can.
The one other thing that I felt was weird in terms of the backwards thing, the returning the nostalgia, was just in an age of streaming and excess, wherein it's so easy to rewatch stuff. So we're not at the time where back in the day, I mentioned this actually in a Letterboxd review recently. I have a friend from church who's much older than me, or an acquaintance I know, who said he saw Star Wars for the last time 4 times. And the reason that makes sense is because at the time, home video didn't exist. So every Christmas, it would be Ray, Star Wars is back in theaters for the last time. So there's 4 different posters over the course of 4 different years that say last time. And that's just how you would see movies. And good movies would get that. Bad movies would kind of get ignored, or maybe some independent collector would take a print from a movie theater and take it home. That's how you did it. Nowadays, though, you can home video or stream, and so it's super accessible. And what's been interesting to watch, and we had this again with Alien Romulus this year, is whenever movies are evoking, without commentary, old material, to me, I just think you're just showing me what I can already look at when I go home tonight after the movie. Whereas like maybe if it was 40 years ago and like I literally had not seen it in years because like I don't have a VHS player and I can't put this in, like, then I think like I wonder if those things would be more exciting or more meaningful to me. And so then for Ready Player One to be a film where like all of the film's kind of like excitement, apart from just Spielberg making good action sequences, is like I would say not all of it, 60% of it, frankly, maybe 40%. Okay, 40%. These these percentages have no meaning and absolutely no value. A lot of the film is references and like icons and pointing to stuff, and I think that's why I like the Shining scene, because it's sort of playing on it. And it also has a different context because it's like she wanted to go dancing, so I took her to see a movie. First off, great line. You learn so much about everybody in that moment. But then also, like, we get to enjoy The Shining in a new context, in a new mention, in a new way, as opposed to just, four Master Chiefs, which is like, oh, that's kind of cool. But also, 4 Master Chiefs exist in Halo 3 when I play co-op with my friends. And so, it's just super interesting to me to kind of see that, like, Hollywood is still doing this and has been doing this and pretty much has, I mean, always has been. But it's just very, it's very interesting to me because it keeps happening. And I just find that odd.
The Shining scene is such a good pick because first off, it is beautifully done. And again, that graininess that you see on the film, you're like, okay. Spielberg did touch this actually. It looks really good. My problem is how it ends because sure, I'm a Shining fan. The carpet, right away, I'm like, oh my God, there's the carpet again. But the fact that it ends with this like Haunted Mansion ride at Disneyland ending where they're jumping on zombies, I was like, oh boy, you dropped the ball on this so hard.
That was an interesting choice.
Right. Why couldn't you have something where you find it like frozen in ice out in the snow or something like that? Just a reference to the movie if you're going to reference the movie. Why do you have to invent something and then make that something so fake looking in comparison to that beautiful grainy footage that we just had? And so that's my thing is it's like you guys set up something really beautiful, but you just didn't land it. That's too bad for me.
It also doesn't feel like a pairing of Halliday and then the woman, where like it would have been, it could have been maybe artistically pleasing to have they step into the ballroom and it's filled with dancers. So you're getting Halliday, who likes The Shining and likes old stuff, but then they're dancing, and that is like what she wants. And so now you're seeing like, oh, part of like a relationship is a unity of interest, or at the very least a concession of them. And so like having them do that, but then like zombies aren't in from what I remember, The Shining. So like, where did they come from?
They even say that. Yeah.
So just very interesting to do that. I don't mind having hyperbolized imagery, so like a giant axe coming down, but like that's because an axe is in the movie.
Exactly.
So but zombies, so that was very interesting.
They almost did it too because they showed the picture torn in half, and that picture, like anybody who knows anything is like, yes, that picture's so cool. Let's see that in live action. Take that picture, make it a live action version of it, but don't turn them into zombies. Just turn it into an actual dance scene where you actually have to use, communication, something that Halliday was weak at and wanted to be stronger at. Use that to further the story. Not I'm jumping from zombie to zombie. It's tiring.
Saying Haunted Mansion was so good, though. It's absolutely true. Like it really is. Like, that's so funny. So we got prominent, significant moments and/or characters. Was there any standout scenes or anything that was meaningful, or characters or whatever? Anything meaningful?
I really like Simon Pegg's curator.
Me too.
The idea that a man misses his friend so much and doesn't actually realize how much the friend missed him, but misses the friend so much that he is there to guide anybody who wants to just visit his friend. And there's something there where it's like, that's a friendship that I could attach to in this movie. There's a particular scene that actually really felt heartfelt when Percival's saying, oh yeah, he only says Karen once in all of these. And he's the curator's like, no, what are you talking about? And then the curator checks, bets him a coin, and checks, and you could see, this time I'm paying attention to him more, the curator in the background, who's actually shocked to see his friend, knowing who it is, seeing his friend only mention Karen once, and is like, oh, he really gave up on that for me. It's kind of this realization going on in the background of the story, when normally when you're watching this, you're paying attention to Percival. It's like, this time I paid attention to the curator, I'm like, oh, that's some good story going on back there. I wish I could see more of it.
I like that the curator was more than just like like a helping hand robot. He had like character. Right. He engaged that made him so enjoyable. And then the minor twist at the end where it's like, oh, it was Ogden, was pretty it was cool. Like, and it adds a lot more depth to the entire system of the archive and everything. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, for me, it was just the entirety of the Easter egg. I thought was just a ton of like the peak part of the film. I like movies that kind of feel like you're watching Twitch. So like which is funny because I don't watch a lot of Twitch, but like watching the escape room movies from a couple of years ago are basically like watching a gamer try to like figure out how to complete the challenge and then move on forward, except it's a movie. And like this kind of felt like that, where you would see these characters get into a challenge, have to try to complete it, and then move forward. Now, the third Easter egg hunt is very much just like, let's have a big battle and then do this thing. But the first two I thought was engaging, and I like the idea of this. I liked how even the race changed. The visual of how it's understood was just compelling to me. That was all pretty cool. And then I thought the Halliday stuff was just, that was great. I found myself wishing the movie was more about Halliday, as the story alluded with the Easter egg hunt, which was all just really interesting. When it came to the ideas of the story being about the difference between like this digital world versus the real world decisions that you can make, or as I kind of like wrote, like I said, satiating one's own desires versus maybe another's real others' desires through real means. I found Halliday's lore just really compelling. Halliday's story is what I think I wanted the movie to be, and I wanted to be instead of having the overwhelming stimuli of IP kind of just around. I also thought it would have been cool if like this Easter egg kind of had Parzival maturing into a Halliday-like figure, playing the game like less like so. For instance, like it kind of alludes that like Halliday, by the end of his life, decided like it would have been better maybe if I had lived my life more in a real way, still appreciating and liking the part of myself that is young and likes playing video games, which I believe is kind of the visual language at the end of the film of him being with his younger self playing games. But then like probably saying I think I just heard it quoted that was something like when people are dying, they don't wonder where all their materials are. They wonder like, I want to be with my family and stuff like that. And so with that in mind, I sort of was hoping the film would go with Parzival's in the game doing things, but the end of the film is him affecting the real world to make a change or to reach victory. If that kind of makes sense.
Absolutely.
Hey there, listener. Want to influence the podcast? Head on over to patreon.com/cinematic doctrine and support the show for $3 a month. In doing so, you'll be able to vote on a movie poll that picks a film we discuss each month. So jump on over there and have your voice heard.
And then the ending. What do you think of the ending of the movie?
I kind of wish it just took chances. There's a part where you have that button he could press to shut down the Oasis. And I think I would appreciate him pressing that button. Taking would I agree with, the idea, maybe disagree, whatever, but this kind of cop out that like Tuesday and Thursdays are off. Sure. But also that doesn't necessarily fix the world. It just gives you 2 days in the world. I think, a definitive answer like, hey, I'm going to shut this whole Oasis off. I realized through the adventure that I would have been better outside of whatever, just take a stance. And then all of a sudden we would have ended the movie with people like, oh, what? It doesn't work anymore. Taking their things off and then realizing where they're at. Like, what am I doing? Even if I don't agree with that stance, it would have been a stance. And this felt like a cop out of like the idea that he's taking ownership. He's spreading it amongst his clan or whatever, but still the idea that you're taking ownership in a thing the whole time where we're like, should there be ownership in this? Should it be a public trade, like a public works kind of thing? The other companies wanting to take full ownership of it. Now you're taking full ownership of it. I thought the whole point was that there shouldn't be ownership of this. So there's a confusion at the ending of like, wait, what was I rooting for? Because now you and your buddies own all of this and you're still pretty young and everybody knows that you actually mature into your 20s. So what happens at 25, 30? Are you still going to be into it as much as you are now? Would have been better for you to just shut this whole thing off so we could address the world issues. I would have appreciated if they just like had a stance and went for it. And instead it felt like they're just copying out and kind of giving you the fairy tale ending that you would expect with like, oh yeah, Andy takes Tuesdays and Thursdays off. I don't know.
I mean, I'm totally with you. I kind of been saving some of my earlier notes that I wrote for now because I feel like they really come more to head, I think, with this ending. For the listener, you figure you have Parzival. He finally beats the final Easter egg and he's transported to this room, and the room is Halliday saying, all right, you did it. There's my kid version. I'm learning to accept my past and also my future where I'm dead, because now Halliday's like an AI or something. He's definitely dead, but he's made like an AI consciousness, and is talking about the real world being the better place, and then says you can press this button, Parzival, if you want, and it'll turn off the Oasis forever, and you're also in control of the whole thing, whatever. And then, like you said, he shares it with the rest of the friends. It's this weird thing where all of the ideas that the movie kind of has come together, where it's talking about like putting things in the past, but then also the whole movie is glorifying the past and IP, which is very interesting. And by interesting, I mean asterisk incompatible. and then you have you have like this is the real world, because that's where you can actually interact with things. But then the way that they showcase that is Parzival and Artemis in the real world kissing each other. But like we had seen a scene where they're dancing in the digital world with the technology and they can physically feel each other. And so like, and first off, that's just funny because I'm like, wait, we've already seen Artemis connects to the Oasis in a public room. What did it look like in person? Like that makes me very uncomfortable. But then you have all these things coming together where it's like the Halliday thing, which especially in 2024 feels a little weird because it's such an idolization of a Silicon Valley like figure, which like just feels gross. And then it's like if Elon Musk's version of Twitter existed, it's like it'll never exist. But like if it did, then people like liking him, it just feels like a nightmare. Then there's also like the real world incompatibility that just feels wrong, especially when like it doesn't seem like the movie knows how to showcase, like now that he's running this company at 23 or something, like, does he know that he probably can't stay in a really nice condo with windows that are that wide? Like, I feel like someone's going to try and kill him. So I don't know. Whatever. None of these things really matter because the movie's just supposed to be fun. It's going to have its Spielberg ending where everyone cheers and the bad guy has like almost like a comedic out as he tries to explain to his associate what she needs to do to help them escape. And then she hits him, whatever, stuff like that. But it does all kind of come together in a way that feels cheap and incomplete. And I just find that a little frustrating. My final note that I pretty much had was like, nothing is real was the header I wrote. I said, for myself, I would have found it simply beautiful if the film had this progression away from technology and more into reality without deriding technology, but just an acceptance of reality as being like, this is where we can make changes. I said, we've already seen through Parzival's eyes how awful the world can be, both intimately and outwardly. And I felt like with this in mind, it would have been really touching if the story was about him accepting the reality he's in and learning to find beauty in life and how he can change it because he's real too. That to me would be beautiful to the point of tears, to watch someone choose to live, even in a horrible life of suffering and injustice, because the gift of living and loving is worth it and can make change. And then I had a final note, which is, but no, we got a movie where Spawn fights a robot that is from Call of Duty Black Ops 3, which it's kind of fun, whatever, cool. Not as cool as I wished it could be, but it is what it is. All in all, Ready Player One, what do you for you, this was a revisit. What do you think? What do you think after this revisit?
It's a fun movie, and as long as you're not going to it for any real, I'm going to go back to what I said before. It is Michael Bay doing a Black Mirror. It's what it feels like, and it's a blast to watch. I will definitely give you that. It definitely feels like it just tells a cookie cutter story, and just kind of finishes off because it needs to have an ending, and not because it actually wants to satisfy anything that it set up early on in this movie.
Yeah.
It's a blast to watch. It's worth watching.
Yeah, I definitely whitewashed a bit of my initial thoughts at the beginning when I talked about it being hard to watch. One of my notes that I outright wrote both in my notepad when I was watching and then also in this document we have, I just said like 15 minutes in, I thought, I hate this movie. Now that totally went away as the film continued. I started to enjoy and appreciate some of its details, but it did become like a bit of a celebration of things that I've come to really dislike. And I think listeners of the show, like week to week, have heard me say consistent themes about like, why are we evoking things poorly and this and that, whatever, which this movie kind of sometimes does. But there's just, But there is something still like worthwhile to watch. At the very end, I did feel a bit of that, like more of the lighthearted Spielbergian charm that he does have. I just wish it was consistent throughout the film, because it was fun to basically have this, like, we're driving around trying not to get shot at, and like he's inside the digital world, and it's like it's just a good mix of ideas being put together in that part. So in that way, I think it there are the touch points of like where it works and why Spielberg was interested in doing the film, probably because he saw that he could do those. I wish it was more consistent.
Want some quick updates on the podcast? Follow the Cinematic Doctrine Instagram for cool posts and story updates. Press the link in the show notes or search Cinematic Doctrine, that's one word, in your Instagram app. Oh, and we're on Threads. Check us out there too.
Oh man. All right. So let's get out of here. Let's do our recommendations, and then we'll let people know where you are again. So recommendations can be anything you want. I usually recommend a movie just because it's easy, but you can recommend going for a walk. You could recommend another podcast. You could recommend sushi. What do you recommend, Frank?
Not sushi. I'm not a fan. I recommend if you enjoyed this movie and you kind of want to get more of that Amblin feel, revisit his library. There's so many times where I talk to somebody, some of these younger kids nowadays, where they're like, "Oh, that's in the 70s, though." I'm like, "Yeah, it's in the 70s. You betcha, but it is." Jaws, to me, I watch it every summer. It's my 4th of July movie. Jurassic Park, there's a charm to Jurassic Park and just
so
Williams'
good.
music. And so I say dive into the Amblin library. You will not be disappointed. It's banger after banger.
Jaws and Jurassic Park, but do you have is there a specific favorite, or are those two basically the ones?
That's tough, right? But for Saving Private Ryan,
it's a good movie.
I'd have to say Jurassic Park, probably. I mean, I do return to Jaws a lot, but I'd have to say Jurassic Park is so complete in every way that they have been trying to capture that magic again now for 30 years, and they're planning on launching another version of it with Scarlett Johansson. They're trying to find it again. It was so good that Michael Crichton changed his book series to like, hey, that movie was amazing that they did off this. Let me, bring this guy back to life. That's just how good that movie is. So check it out.
I am going to recommend kind of a weirdo movie that I ended up finding about. This year I'd been kind of trying to find some martial arts movies when I've had the time, whether like standards or bizarre ones, and the bizarre ones definitely piqued my interest way more. I ended up seeing a movie was getting a Blu-ray release that was kind of a hard to find film before. It's called The Crippled Masters. This is a Chinese martial arts film featuring a man who, I don't know if these were what they were born with, but a man who has no arms, and then a man who has shriveled legs, and the both of them are masters in martial arts. And this movie is basically about how each one of them, through like forms of injustice, have had those limbs injured plot wise. So like the opening of the film is the one man getting his arms cut off, and it's just it's just his body. And then he's like learning how to still live his life with only his legs. And then the other man ends up getting his legs acid burned, and so now he doesn't use them. Anyways, it's a revenge martial arts film that's got way more plot than I was expecting. Like the way that the two of them come together to become martial arts partners was fun. Their trainer is entertaining and is like a yoga master, so you just get to have some cool visuals there too. And then the villain is just like the perfect comical villain where he laughs evil. He's like, I'm gonna turn this dojo into a casino. And it's just like, that's so like just great stuff. And then they have these fights that are just really cool. Now it is an older film, so the martial arts isn't like John Wick fast or anything like that, but it is the physical form and the talent that is here is very present. And then on top of that, it's just also the resiliency of like the human spirit and the body. All that to say is it's a good Blu-ray. Check it out. And the movie's also a ton of fun too. And there's a sequel out there somewhere. So if that could be made like back into a reality, I would really love to see that one too. But check it out. Links will be in the show notes for both of what we're recommending. Frank, thanks so much for making time for this. And thanks for rescheduling too, to be able to do this too. Listeners, you all don't know, but it was hard to get this done. And before we go, where can people find you again?
Again, just Google Geek Freaks. We're out there. We have a website where we post news articles. We have a few podcasts out there, and a social media account that it takes all of my time. Just Google Geek Freaks. You'll find us.
Thanks so much for checking out this episode of Cinematic Doctrine. If you enjoyed this episode, consider leaving a review and subscribing to the podcast. And as mentioned before, Cinematic Doctrine has a Patreon. For as little as $3 a month, you're opted into a once-a-month movie poll where you decide a movie we discuss on the podcast. There are other unique benefits that come with supporting the podcast, so be sure to check that out at patreon.com/Cinematic Doctrine. A special shout out to those who support at the Art House Theater tier on Patreon. Thank you so much, Mom, Dad, Melanie, Shirleyan, and Thomas. You guys are the best, and your continued monetary support is greatly appreciated. Until next time, stay cool. Want some Cinematic Doctrine swag? You're in luck. We've got 3-inch Cinematic Doctrine logo stickers exclusive for Patreon supporters. Perfect for your travel mug or laptop. Head over to patreon.com/Cinematic Doctrine, link in the show notes, and choose the Independent Theater tier. Doing so will net you other perks too. But let's be real, the podcast stickers are the coolest perk. So get yourself some podcast stickers by supporting on Patreon.